Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind of Sai Marie. We spend a lot of time on the show discussing the stories we tell ourselves, but today we're talking about the stories that we tell the world. Kimberly Conte is a memoirist, a truth seeker, and the author of Who Am I Really? Do You Know? Built a career on the idea that pain isn't an endpoint, it's a raw material. So, Kimberly, it's so wonderful to have you in the studio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so you've taken on the title of memoirist. It's a heavy mantle because it means living your life out loud. Why was now the right time to put the specific story into the atmosphere?
In all honesty, it just the way that the world has been going and the way that I think the things I've seen on TV with, my story and the things that have been happening with young people and just mental health and everything, I just figured it was time to kind of, you know, get everything out there that I thought might be helpful to somebody else.
That makes sense. So, who am I really? Do you know? That title. It feels like you're daring the reader to look closer. What is the biggest misconception people have about who you really are?
I would have to say people often assume I'm tougher and colder and more, put together than I actually am. The biggest misconception is that I'm unshakable. In reality, I'm actually somebody that feels things extremely deeply. And I've had, time to myself, for quite a while. And it just, I had to learn my strengths and, how to apply them. And that's the reason why, I chose the title that I did.
I
And
can
that's the,
relate.
yeah,
I
and
can
that's,
relate that.
so, I mean, I feel a lot more than people think I do.
Totally, completely feel that one. So, when you were writing about those moments of deep personal pain, how did you maintain the discipline to turn them into art rather than just a journal entry?
Um, I think I kept the discipline by shifting my mindset from reliving it just more to kind of shaping it. As in a journal entry, where your feelings just kind of are, you just jot them all down and they kind of just spill out and they're everywhere. What I did is I actually just kind of focused on the meaning of each moment I wanted to write about so I could focus on the hurt itself. And then the writing just kind of became its own, and it wasn't as overwhelming to do.
So, you frame your book as a journey of resilience. In your experience, is resilience something you achieve, or is it a continuous practice that you're still working on today?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I don't think that self discovery is something that you can ever achieve completely. One just once and for all and be done. I think especially for me, it's a practice and it's something that I do every day. And writing the book kind of opened the door, but staying honest with myself and with everybody else, is ongoing work. And I'm still learning and I'm still unlearning negative things. And I'm still meeting new parts of who I am every day. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
So, there is a specific kind of bravery required to let strangers see your healing process. Have you found that your readers' responses have helped fill in any of the gaps in your own healing?
Yeah, definitely the people, my readers have absolutely helped, fill in parts of my needed healing, most definitely. And when, someone can say that, they tell me that they saw part of themselves in my story, it kind of reminds me of what I wasn't, walking through in those moments and when I was and what I felt, in that sort of way, and it's kinda like the responses kind of mirror and they reflect back, and I didn't always see myself, that way, but it's great when, the readers definitely do 'cause, it helps me then to know that they're healing and kinda meets in the middle.
That's always nice. It reminds you that your work is worth something and it's making an impact, so you wanna continue doing it for yourself too. So,
Most definitely.
in 2026, we are bombarded with curated lives on social media. Why is the uncurated, gritty reality of a memoir so vital for our culture right now?
I've gotta say, basically, because everything around us, is curated now. People, they're starving for something real. And, this memoir kinda cuts through filters and it highlights reels and shows parts that we're taught to hide. For the most part, like the rawness, matter. That's just it's a big deal right now, because it reminds us that we are all human and that these aren't all, it's not performing, they're not performances. And just the kind of gritty, I guess, uncurated truth, gives people permission to stop pretending and actually try to feel something again.
I love that. That is definitely true. How do you define success for a book? Is it a bestseller list or is it a specific kind of response from readers?
Honestly, success for me would be it's not in the rankings, it's in the impact that it has. So if one reader, reads what I wrote and says that, it made them feel less alone, or it made them feel brave enough to face their own story, or it made them feel like, they didn't need to, go down, the darker path, and that they could stay on the path to, healing and getting better. That means more to me than, being a number 1 bestseller, being on the bestseller list would ever mean.
I can relate to that one too. So, for anyone out there who feels like their story is too quiet or too broken to matter, what would you say to encourage them to pick up their pen and start writing?
Well, a story is never too quiet or too broken to matter as a person, never too broken or too quiet to matter. And I think the biggest thing is that the stories that we think are the smallest often end up being the ones that help people the most, the ones that people needed to hear the most. And I think that I would have to say once, you start writing, just be honest as you're writing and don't write for an audience. Don't write for approval. Just write for yourself. You know what I mean? And once you can put that first truth on a page, the rest kind of just unfolds. But the power isn't in having a perfect story. It's about having the courage to tell, the real one with all the good and the bad in it.
Yes, and it's incredibly cathartic too. What is the next chapter for you? Are we staying in the world of memoir or has this process opened a door to new mediums for you?
It's the next chapter for me is kind of an expansion. I think, writing a memoir didn't close the door. It kind of just proved that I was able to, just getting started, and I was able to actually, you know, I was actually able to do this because not just help some people, but I always wanted to be a writer. And I know that, I'm going to continue in the world of not just memoirs, but of, narratives and things like that, because that's where my voice is the strongest. But I also wanted to set up, go down my creative lane that I'm ready to step into. And, I wanted to not limit myself to just one medium anymore. And I'm hoping whatever comes next is bigger, bolder, and is kind of rooted with the same truth that brought me here. So I'm kind of ready for anything at this point.
Makes sense to me. Finally, if your book were a person, what would it say to the reader who is just picking it up for the first time?
If my book were a person, it would look at the reader and it would say, "Take your time with me. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to walk with you." When you're carrying, you don't have to hide it from anybody while you're here. You can just open the first page and we'll figure out the rest together.
That's beautiful. I like that. Kimberly, thank you for being so generous with your story and your time today. It's been a pleasure to hear what you've had to say about your work and how you see things through your lens. To the listeners, I'm going to have the details in the description for the show notes where you can go and grab your copy of Who Am I Really? Do You Know? And of course, you can pick it up at Amazon or whatever your favorite local bookstore is. It's a masterclass in turning the hard parts of life into something that breathes. And you guys know that here I'm all about that. Let's be raw, let's be real. As always, remember the mind is the most important story that we'll ever tell. And thank you for listening to The Mind of Sai Marie.